One calm weekend at my cousin Lydia's house was exactly what happened to me. You never know when life may throw you into a whirlwind, do you? Despite the occasional family drama that tried to tear us apart, Lydia and I had always been close. She had this adorable little house in the country that was the ideal getaway from the chaos of my life. I had been under a lot of stress at work, and Lydia had persuaded me to spend a weekend with her to unwind. No phones, no distractions, just some girl time. I packed light, eager to unwind, and I headed to her house. When I got there, the atmosphere felt like an embrace, a gentle, welcoming energy that instantly put me at ease. Lydia greeted me at the door, her usual bubbly self, and pulled me into a tight hug. "You're going to love this weekend," she said. What I didn't know was that Lydia had invited a friend over Joseph now. Joseph wasn't just any friend. He was someone I'd heard about from Lydia a few times before, but I had never met him in person. She had always spoken of him in glowing terms, describing him as charming, funny, and just a little mischievous. "You'll love him," she'd said when I met him. I could see what she meant. Joseph had this way about him, polished, confident, but not in an overbearing way. He wasn't traditionally handsome, but his presence was magnetic. The kind of person who could walk into a room and immediately own it without trying too hard. Lydia introduced us, and I tried my best to play it cool. I wasn't there to meet anyone new after all. I was there to relax. Still, I couldn't ignore the way he looked at me, curious like he was trying to figure me out. The first evening was uneventful. We had dinner, played some card games, and chatted was her usual lively self. But I couldn't help noticing how often Joseph's eyes would dart in my direction. I brushed it off, telling myself I was imagining things. After all, he was Lydia's guest, not mine, but then came the second day. I woke up early as I usually do and decided to take a shower before everyone else got up. Lydia's home had a small but comfortable bathroom with a fogged-up mirror that gave me the impression that it was my own little sanctuary. As I was washing my hair, I turned on the hot water to help relieve the stress I had brought from the city. At first, I thought it might have been Lydia moving around in the kitchen or one of her cats knocking something over. But as the sound grew louder and closer, I froze, my heart pounding. "Elizabeth, are you in there?" It was Lydia's voice, and I exhaled in relief. "Yes, what's up, Joe? Joseph and I were considering going into town to get breakfast. Would you like to join us?" I hesitated, but I'm still in the shower, so give me 10 minutes, okay? But hurry up. Lydia called back, and I heard her receding footsteps. I felt at ease once more, but only for a little second before the bathroom door cracked open and my heart leaped into my throat. "Lydia." I reached for a towel to cover myself after 10 minutes, but it was Joseph, not Lydia. Time seemed to stop as Joseph stood in the doorway, his face displaying a mixture of embarrassment and something else I couldn't quite put my finger on. My heart was pounding, and my mind was racing to figure out what was going on. I yelled, clutching the towel tightly around me, "What are you doing?" He appeared equally shocked, and I could feel his hands rising in an apologetic gesture. "Elizabeth, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that Lydia had asked me to get a bag because she thought you might have left it in here." I should have knocked, but his explanation seemed plausible, so I told myself to let it go. Maybe I was over-analyzing it after all. It wasn't like he'd barged in on purpose, or had he got out? I snapped my voice firmer this time, and he nodded quickly before backing out of the bathroom and shutting the door behind him. For a while, I stood there with my heart still racing in my ears. The entire interaction seemed strange, but after getting dressed, I went to the kitchen to join Lydia and Joseph, determined to ignore the awkwardness. Lydia was singing a song while happily frying eggs, utterly oblivious to what had recently transpired. However, Joseph avoided my gaze, focusing instead on the coffee he was pouring for his drowsy head in the morning. We were set to leave for town when Lydia chirped, so I nodded and forced a grin. "Yes, let me go get my shoes." Although Joseph and I were clearly tense, the drive into town was unremarkable. Lydia seemed oblivious as she talked about her favourite small cafe and the farmer's market on the weekends. Joseph occasionally added his usual charm, but I couldn't get rid of the memory of that morning when we got to the cafe, and Lydia excused herself to make a quick phone call, leaving Joseph and me at the table alone. "I truly apologise for what I said earlier," he said quietly, breaking the silence as I looked at him. His face was genuine, but there was something too purposeful in his tone. "It's okay," I answered, curtly, not wanting to cause a problem. He moved over and lowered his voice, saying, "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." "Sincerely, Elizabeth," I nodded while sipping my coffee to keep from staring at him. Let's just pretend anything occurred, but could I truly forget? The remainder of the day went by quickly as we strolled through the market, tasted some regional specialties, and even shared a few giggles. Lydia, who was always the life of the party, was unaware of the subtle undercurrent between Joseph and me that evening. Back at the house, we made the decision to watch a movie to wind down. Lydia insisted on watching a corny romantic comedy, and Joseph groaning in protest. "Come on, it's a classic." We all sat down on the couch, Lydia in the middle, Joseph on one side, and me on the other. However, as the film was playing, I couldn't help but notice how Joseph's eyes kept wandering toward me, even when she wasn't looking. I told myself that I was reading too much into his actions, but deep down I knew something wasn't right, and Lydia fell asleep. This wasn't unusual for her. She had always been the type to fall asleep early, especially after a busy day. Joseph and I stayed up watching the rest of the film in near silence, with the only sound coming from the TV. When the credits rolled, I got up, eager to get out of the increasingly awkward situation, so I thought I was going to call it a night. He whispered gently, "Elizabeth," which stopped me cold. I turned to face him, my heart sinking at the conflicted look on his face. "Can we talk for a minute?" he begged. I hesitated, my hand lingering over the stair railing Joseph. "I don't think there's anything to talk about." My voice was firm, but inside I felt a whirlwind of emotions, confusion, uneasiness, and a lingering tension that I couldn't quite place. "Please," he said, getting up from the couch. His tone was low, almost pleading. For a brief moment, I looked at Lydia, who was still sound asleep, her soft snores barely audible over the movie's end credits. A naive, inquisitive part of me wanted to hear what he had to say again, but my better judgment told me that I should wake her up so she could act as a buffer between us. I nodded and cautiously made my way back into the living room, where I sat down. What is so crucial? For the first time since I'd met him, Joseph ran a hand through his hair and appeared conflicted. I'm not sure how to put it without coming across as awkward. He started to glance Lydia's way, but I sensed that something is off between us. I was struck by the words like a ton of bricks. When I asked, "What are you talking about?" my chest constricted, and I felt a wave of heat rise to my face. He sighed, leaning forward with his hands clasped together and his elbows on his knees. "I know it's crazy, I know it's wrong, but ever since I met you, I can't stop thinking about you. There's this connection I feel, and I can't ignore it." My first reaction was to laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was so ridiculous. "This is absurd, Joseph. You barely know me, and you're Lydia's buddy." I know he said it quickly, but I'm not making this up. "Elizabeth, don't tell me you don't feel it either." I got up and shook my head, feeling nothing, and it wouldn't matter even if I did. I'm not saying we do anything about it. I just needed to say it to get it off my chest. "Please don't hate me for this." I stared at him with my mind racing, wondering how things had gotten to this point. I would have come here to unwind and escape the stress of my life, not to get caught up in some tangled web of emotions and misplaced feelings. Lydia is my cousin, and this is crossing a line. "For Lydia's sake and mine, Joseph," I replied firmly. "Whatever you think or feel, you need to put it aside." He nodded slowly, his shoulders dropping. "You're right." I apologized for not responding. Instead, I turned and went upstairs, my heart racing with each step. When I got to my room, I closed the door and leaned against it, letting out a shaky breath. What had transpired over the remainder of the night was uneasy. I replayed Joseph's words in my head, questioning every glance and moment from the previous 2 days. Had I done anything to support him? Had I completely misinterpreted the situation? By morning, I had made up my mind to keep my distance. I would end the weekend without making a scene, then I would leave and never return. Lydia didn't deserve to get caught in the middle of this. When I came downstairs, the atmosphere was noticeably different. Lydia was her usual cheerful self, humming as she made coffee, but Joseph was quiet, avoiding eye contact and keeping his responses short. "Good morning," Lydia greeted me with a bright smile. "Did you sleep well?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, fine, great. I was thinking we could go for a hike today. There's a beautiful trail nearby that I've been dying to show you." I hesitated, glancing at Joseph. He was staring into his coffee cup, his jaw tight. The idea of spending more time with both of them felt unbearable, but I couldn't come up with an excuse fast enough. Sounds good, I said finally. The hike was beautiful, just as Lydia had promised, but I barely noticed the tension between Joseph and me was palpable. Though Lydia seemed blissfully unaware, she walked ahead, pointing out wild flowers and sharing stories, while Joseph and I lagged behind in awkward silence. At one point, Lydia turned around and teased, "You two are so quiet today. Did I miss something?" "No," we said in unison, our voices overlapping. It was enough to make her laugh, but her laughter only deepened my discomfort by the time we got back to the house. I was mentally and emotionally drained. I needed space-time to think, and most importantly, an exit strategy that evening. Lydia suggested we play board games, but I declined, claiming a headache she didn't push, simply telling me to rest and let her know if I needed anything. As I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I felt a mix of relief and guilt. Relief that the day was over, guilt for keeping something so significant from Lydia. She had always been good to me, and I hated the thought of betraying her trust, even if I hadn't technically done anything wrong. But had I Joseph's words replayed in my mind? His tone, his expression was I complicit by not telling Lydia what had happened, or was I protecting her by keeping it to myself? The weekend came to an end, and I left Lydia's house with a heavy heart. She hugged me tightly, thanking me for coming and promising to visit me soon. Joseph said a polite goodbye, his tone neutral, his eyes unreadable as I drove away. I felt a mix of emotions, relief, confusion, and an overwhelming sense of gratitude that nothing more had happened. I learned a lot about limits, honesty, and the complexity of human relationships from the experience. Although I had no control over Joseph's emotions or behavior, I did have control over mine, and I knew that setting and upholding a boundary was the appropriate thing to do.